Have you ever noticed that the people who seem to understand life most deeply are often the ones who walk alone? Not because they're antisocial or broken, not because they've been rejected or abandoned, but because they've made a conscious choice to honor their authentic nature over social conformity. What if your solitude isn't a sign that something's wrong with you, but evidence that something's profoundly right, that you've awakened to truths that most people aren't ready to face?
Share in the comments if you've ever felt called to walk your own path, despite the loneliness it brings. And if you're new here, welcome to our exploration of Alan Watts's insights about the sacred nature of chosen solitude and why the most conscious individuals often find themselves on a path less traveled. There's a fundamental misunderstanding in our culture about what it means to be alone. We've been conditioned to see solitude as failure, isolation as punishment, and independence as selfishness. Every social institution pushes the narrative that happiness comes from fitting in, that success means being accepted by others, that the ultimate goal is to find your tribe and blend seamlessly into the collective. But what if this entire framework misses the most important truth about human consciousness? Alan Watts understood something that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The moment you truly wake up to who you are and what life really is, you inevitably find yourself walking alone. Not because you choose to reject others, but because you can no longer participate in the collective illusions that keep most people comfortable in their sleep. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. But here's what Watts recognized that so many miss. Joining the dance of existence often means leaving the dance of social conditioning. When you wake up to the arbitrary nature of most social rules, the futility of status games, the emptiness of consumer culture, and the beautiful absurdity of existence itself, you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't go back to pretending that the emperor has clothes when you've clearly seen his nakedness. This creates what I call the awakening paradox. The more conscious you become, the less you fit into unconscious systems. The more authentic you become, the less tolerance you have for artificial relationships. The more you understand about life's deeper truths, the harder it becomes to engage in shallow conversations about meaningless topics. You find yourself increasingly unable to participate in the collective drama that once seemed so important and real. The chosen man, and by this I don't mean gender-specific, but anyone who has chosen consciousness over comfort, discovers that his awakening comes with a price. That price is the loss of easy belonging. You can no longer find refuge in groupthink because you've learned to think for yourself. You can no longer hide in crowd mentality because you've discovered your individual nature. You can no longer seek validation from others because you've found validation from within. This is why Watts often spoke about the necessity of solitude for genuine spiritual development. As he said, in order to go out of your mind, you have to go into your mind. And going into your mind, really exploring the depths of your own consciousness, is something that can only be done alone. No one else can walk the inner journey for you. No one else can face your fears, question your beliefs, or discover your authentic nature. This work requires solitude not as a luxury, but as a necessity. But here's where most people get confused about the nature of chosen solitude. They think it means becoming a hermit, rejecting all human connection, or developing a superiority complex about their awakening. This isn't what Watts taught, and it's not what genuine spiritual maturity looks like. The chosen man doesn't walk alone because he hates people. He walks alone because he loves truth, more than he loves the comfort of belonging to illusions. There's a profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others. Solitude is the joy of feeling connected to yourself. Loneliness is about lacking something external. Solitude is about discovering something internal. Loneliness makes you desperate for company. Solitude makes you selective about company. The chosen man has learned to distinguish between these two states. He's not running from connection. He's running toward authentic connection. He's not avoiding people. He's avoiding the games people play. He's not rejecting love. He's rejecting the conditions and expectations that most people attach to love. As Watts observed, we seldom realize, for example, that our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own. For we think in terms of languages and images, which we did not invent. but which were given to us by our society. When you wake up to how much of what you thought was you was actually just social programming, you realize you need space to discover who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. This requires stepping away from the constant input of other people's opinions, expectations, and energy. It requires creating sacred space where you can hear your own voice without the interference of the collective noise. This is why the chosen man often appears antisocial to others, even though he's actually becoming more genuinely social. He's learning to relate from authenticity rather than from role-playing. He's learning to love from wholeness rather than from neediness. He's learning to connect from choice rather than from compulsion. But this deeper way of relating requires that he first establish a solid relationship with himself, which can only happen in solitude. The path of chosen solitude is not easy. There are times when the loneliness cuts deep, when the desire for easy belonging feels overwhelming, when you question whether your commitment to authenticity is worth the price of isolation. There are moments when you wonder if you're just being difficult, if you're missing out on something important, if your standards for connection are impossibly high. But then you remember what Watts taught about the nature of genuine relationship. He understood that most of what people call relationship is actually mutual use, people coming together not to truly see and appreciate each other, but to get their needs met, to avoid their fears, to maintain their illusions about themselves and reality. Real relationship, he suggested, can only exist between people who have first learned to be whole on their own. As he explained, you can't love another person until you love yourself, and you can't love yourself until you stop trying to be someone else. This is why the chosen man must walk alone first, not permanently, but long enough to discover who he is when he's not trying to be what others want him to be. Long enough to develop genuine self-love rather than just self-improvement. Long enough to become someone worth knowing, including by himself. This solitary journey inevitably leads to what Watts called the wisdom of insecurity, the recognition that all of our attempts to find security through external relationships, achievements, or identities are ultimately futile. The only real security comes from learning to be comfortable with insecurity, to find peace with uncertainty, to discover that you are not a fixed self that needs to be defended, but a flowing process that can adapt to whatever arises. When you truly understand this, you realize that your solitude isn't a problem to be solved, but a gift to be treasured. It's in solitude that you discover your own depths. It's in solitude that you learn to distinguish between your authentic desires and your conditioned wants. It's in solitude that you develop the inner compass that can guide you through life's complexities without needing constant external validation. The chosen man discovers that walking alone doesn't mean walking in loneliness. Quite the opposite. It means walking in the deepest possible intimacy with existence itself. When you're not constantly seeking approval, avoiding rejection, or managing other people's emotions, you become available to the profound connection that's always present between you and life itself. You begin to feel at home in your own skin in a way that most people never experience. You develop a relationship with silence that's more nourishing than most conversations. You discover that your own company can be more interesting than most entertainment. You learn that your inner world is vast enough to provide endless exploration and discovery. This doesn't mean you become indifferent to human connection. If anything, the opposite happens. When you're truly comfortable being alone, you become much more interesting company for others. When you don't need anything from people, you can offer them something genuine. When you're not seeking to be understood, you become capable of real understanding. As Watts put it, the art of living is neither careless drifting on the one hand, nor fearful clinging to the past and the known on the other. It consists in being sensitive to each moment, in regarding it as utterly new and unique, in having the mind open and wholly receptive. The chosen man learns to live this way not despite his solitude, but because of it. His time alone has taught him to be present rather than perform, to be authentic rather than acceptable, to be responsive rather than reactive. When he does choose to connect with others, he brings this quality of presence and authenticity to the relationship, but he's also learned to be extremely selective about these connections. He's discovered that it's better to be alone than to be with people who require him to abandon himself. He's learned that surface-level socializing often leaves him feeling more lonely than actual solitude. He's realized that most group activities are based on shared unconsciousness rather than shared awareness, and participating in them feels like a betrayal of his own awakening. This selectivity isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. It's the natural result of having developed genuine self-worth that doesn't depend on external validation. When you truly value your own consciousness, you naturally become protective of it. You stop exposing yourself to people and situations that diminish your awareness or pull you back into unconscious patterns. The chosen man understands that his solitude serves not only himself, but the collective as well. As Watts noted, through our eyes, the universe is perceiving itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its glory, of its magnificence. When you walk alone in consciousness, you're not withdrawing from the world. You're becoming a clearer channel for the world to know itself. Your solitude allows you to develop the clarity, sensitivity, and wisdom that you can eventually offer to others who are ready for it. But this gift can only be given from a place of fullness, not emptiness. It can only be shared by someone who has first found it within themselves. This is perhaps the deepest truth about why the chosen man walks alone. He's not running away from responsibility to others, but preparing to fulfill that responsibility in the most authentic way possible. His solitude is not selfish but generous. It's the necessary preparation for eventually being able to serve life from a place of genuine wisdom rather than unconscious need. The path of chosen solitude requires tremendous courage because it means giving up the false security of belonging to something that doesn't truly see or value who you are. It means accepting that most people won't understand your journey, your choices, or your values. It means being willing to be misunderstood, judged, or even rejected by those who can't recognize the consciousness you've worked so hard to develop. But it also offers something that collective belonging can never provide: the deep peace that comes from being absolutely authentic, the profound freedom that comes from needing nothing from anyone, and the unshakable confidence that comes from knowing who you are regardless of what anyone else thinks about you. If you felt called to walk this solitary path, know that you're not broken, selfish, or antisocial. You're simply answering the call of your own consciousness to discover who you really are beneath all the layers of conditioning and expectation. Your solitude is not a punishment but a privilege, not a failure but an achievement, not an ending but a beginning. The chosen man walks alone, not because he has no choice, but because he has finally learned to choose consciously. And in that choosing, he discovers a depth of connection to existence that most people, in all their socializing and belonging, never experience. If this resonates with your own journey of chosen solitude, share your experience in the comments. Your courage to walk alone might inspire someone else to honor their authentic path. And if you're ready to explore more of Alan Watts's profound insights about the necessity of solitude for genuine awakening, subscribe to join our community of conscious individuals learning to find the sacred in the solitary journey.